Welcome to Across the Pond, a podcast for leaders in market research to help them grow their insight agencies, with Steve Henke and Paul Griffiths.
Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to Across the Pond, our podcast on how to grow your insights agency. I am Steve Henke with Harpeth Marketing.
Hi, and I'm Paul Griffiths from Client Advocates.
This is episode 7. We have 6 under our belt, 6 that are up posted on our websites, and now we're gonna run a few more to get 2025 started. I'm pretty excited.
Exactly. And episode 7, we want to talk about the most effective low-cost or no-cost marketing and sales ideas to use in 2025. And we've got our usual 20 minutes. So without further ado, I'm suggesting we just dive straight into this one, Steve, because I know from what you've said, you've got some really good ideas around this one.
Well, I've got some ideas. We'll let the listeners decide if they're good ideas. Yes, I did a little homework, a little prep for a change, and I've got a few ideas. So I'll go ahead and get started, and Paul, you jump in and tell me that I'm wrong, but I'll go ahead and get started. So when we talk about low cost, no cost, I think that the easy go-tos are, spend more smart time on LinkedIn, send out a monthly or a quarterly email newsletter, blog frequently, and you should be doing all of those. There's no question about that. But I think there are other things that we don't think about that can be very, very powerful and effective and don't cost anything. So I'll throw out a few ideas. Feel free to jump in and let me know what you're thinking, Paul.
Perfect.
From a sales perspective, I think that anybody that's involved in selling, so full-time sales, seller, doer, whatever your role, you ought to be using a pipeline to manage your sales efforts. And whether it is a piece of paper that's taped to your wall or built into your CRM, it doesn't matter. A pipeline, for those of you who are kind of unfamiliar with it, is a place to keep track of all of your sales activities and putting your prospective buyers in the kind of the place in the buying, selling process where they are at the beginning, middle, bottom. It's interesting, Paul, when I talk to research agencies about pipelines, they all say they have one. But the vast majority are only talking about the very bottom. I sent out these proposals and I won it or I didn't. What I'm talking about is all the way up to the top. The whole pipeline, from new sales leads to initial conversations to deeper conversations to capability presentations and then into proposals and wins. It's the one place you can go to that everything related to your sales activities is right there. And the reason I like that is, if you are reporting to somebody, it's an easy report to share with your boss to show them where you are. But for yourself, as a self-management tool, it ensures that nothing falls through the cracks.
Yeah.
You know where you are with every single sales opportunity because it's right in front of you. You can't miss it. You can't forget about it. So to me, it's a critical tool for being successful in sales. So that was tip number 1.
Yeah, and look, I completely agree with that. And anybody who's listened to any of the other episodes, I know Steve and I bang on about CRM systems quite a lot, and pipeline is part of the CRM system or part of your CRM setup. I could not agree more about that. And I think where I see agencies struggled with growth, particularly in the environment at the moment, which is, I think is tough, a lot of people are finding tough. It's because they haven't got enough of those conversations going on in a systematic and organized and consistent way, high enough up the pipeline. So I absolutely buy that. And in an ideal world, you get to a situation where, based on how long it takes you to move a client through the pipeline on average, and how long that process takes, and the number of proposals you need to win to meet your revenue targets, and your average project size, you can actually really quite effectively model how many of those early stage conversations you need to have. And that is, I think, key to building a sustainable growth business. Because if you can't control the outputs, you can't control the amount of budget that clients have. What you can control is the number of conversations and engagements you're having at the top of the pipelines. I absolutely buy that. And I would, if I may, I might build on it by saying, if you're going to have a pipeline, you need to have mapped a customer journey. And that's the other side of having a pipeline, is I think you need to have a mapped customer journey. It doesn't cost you any money to do it. You can do it by talking to some of your potential clients and asking them how they came to work with you. You can use in terms of your historic knowledge and understanding of how you've developed clients over the years. But I think if you can marry up a customer journey with your pipeline as a kind of a tangible measure of where proposals and where opportunities are, that becomes very, very powerful.
I think that's a great point. I think you're spot on, and I think you also mentioned something. You can nerd out on pipelines. You really can, and start measuring things like acceleration through the pipeline and things like that. But I think your point about using it to model a future behavior, future opportunities, it almost becomes a forecasting tool. I think there's great power, and if you're interested, there's all kind of resources online about how to effectively use a pipeline other than just as a place to keep some notes. I would, again, to Paul's point, I think if you can marry it to the customer journey, you've got a very powerful sales tool at your fingertips, and it costs nothing.
Yeah.
So
and then I think
that was idea number one, Paul.
Yeah. Can I just add something else to that? Because it just occurs to me. And
please.
This may kind of build out some of your next points, but if you can marry a customer journey and a pipeline and your ideal marketing mix of what sort of marketing activities work best at different points in that customer journey, in that funnel, that becomes really, from a marketing and sales perspective, that is kind of like mind-blowing. I do it for my own business. I'm sure Steve does it for his. I know clients that do it, and that becomes really exciting. So, for instance, you can sit there and go, right, we've got a load of clients in this part of the pipeline. What marketing activity would best move them down? And it might well be it's a podcast, or it might well be it's an in-person event, or it might well be it's a webinar or something. But anything you can do to kind of you combine your customer journey and your pipeline and your marketing planning and content creation becomes super, super, super effective, I think. And it's all free because that's all just brain space.
Great point, Paul. Thanks. All right, I'm going to move on. Next topic, next idea.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, here we go. We all like referrals. Who doesn't like referrals? But there's a problem with referrals. There's never enough of them. They stop at some point. They run out. And you don't want to be sitting around waiting for referrals. You don't want to rely on somebody else for your success. So what do? Go out and ask for them. Ask your clients and contacts for referrals. It's a phone call. And I think there's two opportunities where this makes a lot of sense. One is on LinkedIn. If you go to the profile of your LinkedIn contacts, under their headshot, it'll say 500 plus connections. And for the most part, it's a live link. So you can see who your contacts are connected, who your connections are connected to. And if you have a connection that you know reasonably well, look at their connections and ask for introductions. Those warm handoffs are far better than trying to reach out to somebody cold and make it happen. The other place to ask for referrals is, frankly, anytime during a project is going on and it's going well, and your client is pleased and they're telling you that you're pleased, there's no reason you can't say to them, listen, I'm glad you're happy. I really appreciate that. Can you think of anybody else who might also benefit from our services? Just ask. And odds are right then and there, they're not going to know anybody, but you've planted the seed anyway that you are open to referrals. So don't just sit around and wait. Be a little bit proactive with them and stir up a little activity if you can.
And I think that's a really, really powerful, and to your point, free way of doing sales and marketing. But there's a way of asking for referrals, which I learned from a really smart guy called Andy Bounds. If you haven't come across Andy, go and check him out on LinkedIn. He's a really smart sales and marketing guy. I was lucky enough to go on some training with him a couple of years ago talking about referrals. And he makes a really good case for why a means of asking for referrals, because what Andy posits, and I agree with this, is that there's a level of awkwardness about going and asking a client for a referral. Mm-hmm. So, Steve, is there anybody you'd recommend me to or be willing to introduce me to? You're putting all the onus on. I'm putting all the onus on Steve there. I'm putting Steve on the spot, and Steve might go, ugh, and I'm probably going and feeling a bit ick about asking for it. However, if, to Steve's point, I've checked out Steve's LinkedIn profile and I can see he's connected to John Smith, MD of Agency X, then what I can do to Steve is, rather than saying, Steve, can you introduce me to John Smith at X? What I can go is I can go, Steve, I'd really like to ask your opinion. What would be the best way for me to connect with John? I think you know him. Have you got any tips or any ideas of the best way to do that? Now, at that point, Steve can do one of three things. One, Steve can go, actually, I don't know John that well. We're on LinkedIn, but I don't really know him. I don't feel comfortable. In which case, fine, but you've asked. Secondly, Steve goes, oh, yeah, no, John's a good guy. You know what? I'm happy to give you his email address and, you can connect with him or email him. And at that point, I say, Steve, would it be all right when I do email him to say that we know each other and kind of, the idea of talking to him, was partly related at a conversation I had with you? Or thirdly, the best outcome, Steve goes, oh, yeah, I know John. He's a lovely bloke. Why don't I send him an email and I'll copy you in and you can have the conversation yourself? But you've taken all of the onus off the person you're asking for the referral, and you've posited it not in terms of, can you introduce me? You've posited it in terms of, what's the best way for me to connect with them? And so therefore, the individual you're asking feels a lot less awkward about making the referral. And I say, I got this from Andy Bounds. I've used it in my own business with huge amounts of success and efficacy. And actually, I talk to all my clients about it now. And I know the clients that use this find that to be a really much more comfortable way of asking for referrals. So yes, but in terms of referrals, brilliant no-cost way of sales and marketing.
That's great. If you don't mind, I'm going to steal that, because that is really, really terrific way of positioning the same ask, but just in a much less threatening way. Really.
Yeah. And I'm sure Andy will. I say to Andy, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make sure I just cite you, because I can't claim this is my own, but I'm sure Andy wouldn't mind you using it so long as you cite him as well.
I absolutely will. Thank you. All right. Another idea? Can I go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, next one. I think one of the hardest things in business is to acquire a first-time client, because by definition, you're stealing them from somebody else. So they have lots of trepidation, right? They're concerned, they're afraid to make the move. So how do you ease that fear? And one of the best ways to ease that fear is testimonials from existing clients. And to be clear, they have to be attributed to somebody. Unattributed testimonials, to me, carry zero weight. Unattributed or anonymous case studies, for example, can still have some weight, but testimonials don't mean anything, and unattributed testimonials. So I think, and you can use them on your website, you can use them in proposals, you can use them in presentations. I'd use them all over the place. And to me, there's two easy ways to get them, or two easier ways to at least ask for them. One is, at the end of a project, you're having your wrap-up meeting with your client, you're going over all the details and the findings, et cetera. And the client says, oh, you guys were terrific, great job. You came in, got everything we needed under budget. Your response to that needs to be, thank you very much. Can I get that in writing? They're feeling good about you. It's a good time to ask. The other place to do it is in a post-project customer satisfaction study. It is amazing to me how many agencies don't do that for themselves. I think they're missing out for a whole lot of reasons. They ought to be doing it. But if you are doing it, and I would encourage you to do it, if you are doing it, after you ask your questions about the project and the process and the staff and all that stuff, add a question at the end that says, is there anything else you'd like to share with us that we can use for marketing purposes? If you look at our website, we've got them all over the place, and all of them came from that question at the end of a customer sat studies. I am a big fan of gathering testimonials on a continuous basis and weaving them into your marketing. And again, cost zero.
Yeah, I think it's a really good tip, Steve. I mean, I for my business, and I know for other clients that I work with, we've started using the recommendations function on LinkedIn as a good way of doing that. So you can on LinkedIn you can ask for recommendations. Generally, what I think works quite well is you send the client a note on an email going, look, I'd quite like to ask for a recommendation on LinkedIn. Are you happy for me to do that? They come back and go, yes, hopefully. At that point, you can kind of go into LinkedIn, ask for the recommendation of the individual. And what I quite often say is, I know this is a personal recommendation, but is that something that you would feel comfortable as putting on a website or on an agency to show the value that we add, not just as an individuals, but as agencies? I think if you're, to your point, if you ask at the right moment, I think most people will, if you've done a good job and it hasn't gone all horribly wrong, which hopefully, fingers crossed it hasn't, people are more than willing to give them. And to your point, it just adds out that level of credibility and that level of sense that sometimes just tips things over. And you can use them for posts, you can use on LinkedIn, you can use them as part of your email collateral. You can, to your point, you can have them on the website. It's a very, very cost effective way of building credibility. So I really like that. I really like that as an idea. Right, Steve, I think we've got 3 minutes left. So have you got one quick one left?
I do. I'll be quick.
Go for it.
Just because a client is gone doesn't mean they're gone forever. If you've done some work with a client, in the past, but let's say, what are we, in January of 2025 right now, and you didn't do any work with them in 2024, reach back out to them. Reach back out and try and rekindle that relationship. You don't have to ask for a project, but just get the relationship going again and have some conversations that hopefully will lead to a project down the road. But we don't know why they left. That's a good reason to call them, is to find out why they're no longer with you. But just rekindle that relationship. Ask them how they are, what's going on at their business, and see where it leads. Don't ignore them. Gone doesn't mean gone forever.
And I couldn't agree more. When I work with clients and agencies, I try and get rid of the concept of the lapsed client. They're just, everybody's a client. It's just, they're just clients that haven't worked with you recently. That's, at the moment where you put into the lapsed bucket, it feels like, well, the relationship is no longer there. The relationship is there. You just need to invest in it. And so if we believe what Gartner says and what the Ehrenberg Institute says about kind of lapsed clients, and when clients have got budget, at any one time, a client, only 5% of your market is in a position to buy. That means 95% of your market don't have budget because they've either got they've got other stuff going on, or they've got an existing client relationship that they're using, or for whatever reason, there's lots of changes going on in their organization. But I think what we as marketeers and salespeople within research need to do is be better at talking to people on an ongoing basis and building those relationships, rather than looking at it in terms of, well, we've done a project, we're now going to not talk to them for 3 months or 6 months, and then we need to reach out. So your reaching out is perfectly sensible, and I couldn't agree with it more. I think it needs to be in the context of, we should always be reaching out to all of our clients, current or past, because that's how you maintain and build those relationships. And that's kind of what all of this low-cost, no-cost marketing is all about.
Yeah. Let me just add one final point to that, Paul, is when we talk in kind of sales terms, buyers don't buy from you until they get to know you, then like you, then trust you. Well, guess what? All those former clients have already been through that with you. They know you, they like you, they trust you, they've spent money with you. They're kind of low-hanging fruit. It's just that you're letting the fruit shrivel on the vine. You got to reach out and pick it.
Yeah. Perfect. And look, we're up for time, but this ties in perfectly with episode 8, which will be coming down the pipes in a little while, where Steve and I think are going to be talking about how to get more value from your existing clients and from key accounts. All of this stuff is relevant, and I'm sure we'll touch it again. But for today, Steve, that's been really, really good. There's a couple of things I need to go and do. I'm cheap as chips in terms of what I try and do and spend on my business. I'm going to go and try some of these low cost or no cost techniques out. But thank you very much for all of your brain power and all of your inspiration.
The pleasure was mine, Paul. As always, good chatting with you. You and I are brothers from different mothers, and I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you. I hope the folks listening in appreciated it, and we'll see you next time on Across the Pond.
Thanks for watching and listening to Across the Pond. Get in touch with Paul at clientadvocates.co.uk and Steve at harpethmarketing.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.